Welcome on welcome to the Chapter 30 Flipped Classroom on the makings of an industrial society. In this flipped classroom, we're going to focus on Europe and its dawn in industrialization. And we'll be focusing a lot in the beginning on Great Britain. Most of the key concepts in this chapter will revolve around key concept 5.1. This picture is called The Weavers, and the sentiment passed on by this picture, both of rebellion and also of desperation of the working class, is something you should focus on as you read and as you listen. The human cost of the Industrial Revolution and changes during this revolution are really important to the AP curriculum. The other thing to remember is that no one saw this coming, and for most people, the location of industry at the time, if they were to guess, would have gone to China. I want you to think about why that might be. Why would China be the place where people thought would be industrializing first? So the overarching ideas of this chapter are fourfold. Beginning in Britain in the 18th century and then moving west to Europe, to Western Europe, North America, Russia, and Japan, which is alluded to in this chapter, but we'll really get into in chapter 32. The Industrial Revolution transformed life in almost an unprecedented manner. Machines driven by new inanimate sources of power replaced traditional and human animal power. The developing machine age devices increased worker productivity, economic specialization, and large-scale enterprise. And in the long term, what this meant was that people's standard of living materially was raised. However, in the short term, it also led to immense social and economic dislocation, as well as a lot of suffering. Socialists such as utopians and the more influential Karl Marx dreamed of transforming or destroying this new industrialized world. And we'll begin with why Great Britain was the initial area of the Industrial Revolution. This goes along with key concept 5.1, Roman numeral 1a. A variety of factors led to the rise of industrial production. So, why was it Great Britain? We're going to get into that in this slide. So we're going to begin up here. High agricultural productivity definitely contributed to Great Britain's lead in deindustrialization. There were minimal wars, unlike in mainland Europe, like with Napoleon and France. There was a high degree of technology in agriculture, and there were new food crops that really bolstered the population from the Columbian Exchange. There's also numerous skilled artisans who were basically tradesmen and led in innovation. The guilds had really done a lot to bolster education within these artisan groups, and the guilds were falling out of fashion. Moving on to natural resources, Great Britain has a ton of things that are good for industrialization. They have a lot of coal and a lot of iron, and they have colonial resources as well. Not to mention their location is ideal. They have many rivers and canals to transport goods to market, and they're surrounded by ocean to get their goods out to even further external markets. In addition, banking and financial institutions were incredibly supportive of this new capital investment. They had a lot of capital from all of these explorations and joint stock companies, and people were looking for ways to invest that capital. A lot of times, the people who were working in and with this capital were the same people who were working in and within government. So there was a close tie between the supportive and stable government and the banking and financial institutions. Plus, the government did all kinds of things to push people into the cities, like the enclosure movement, making all public lands, privatized. They also were using the patent system, which protected intellectual property. Patents are much more controversial today, and we can talk about that in class if you would like to ask me about it. And last but not least, they had low taxes on industry. A lot of that was because these two groups were working together. So this set of pictures depicts the enclosure movement. If you remember medieval manners, there was a lot of land that could be used by multiple people. So you had these fields that could be used by all kinds of peasants, and a group pasture, and a group orchard. Well, all of that land was privatized, as you can see here, and the Acts of Parliament to enclose the land lasted from 1750 to 1850. So if you look here, you can see that under 1%, you've got under 1% of land being enclosed on the outskirts. But in the big cities, you've got, or near big cities, excuse me, you've got more of land being enclosed. So either 30 to 50% or over 50% of land being enclosed, which really pushed people to these urban areas. The first transportation system was the canal system. When you didn't have rivers, which usually ran north-south, you could have these canals to run east-west, so you could crisscross. Canals became out of fashion a little bit more with railroads. And this just represents a lock system where the river would change in elevation and you'd have to change in elevation with it. This shows you the coal producing areas and the areas of metal production and major areas then of woolen cloth. You can also get an idea of where the canals were built and their navigable rivers. And what you can see is that they basically develop a network of transportation. The canals connect the rivers to the other canals, to the rivers, etc. And you've got cloth production around cities. And then you've got your coal producing areas and mining producing areas. Now, if we look up here, we can see more coal being produced in Newcastle as well. And here, we've got a further production of coal. On this map, you can also see the railroads, which replaced the canals. And then towns with over 20,000 people are shown by the size of the circle. So you can see London is the biggest. Duh. They've got machinery and consumer goods. How exciting for them. And then you've got your exposed coal fields. And if you notice, a lot of the exposed coal fields overlap with industrial areas because coal was used for industry, to power industry. Next, we'll be getting into the textile revolution and the transportation revolution.